Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today is October 17th, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So today's big topic is, of course, the victory plan. Yesterday, Zelensky presented the victory plan to the Ukrainian population. We know that for the last few weeks, Zelensky has been flying all around the world presenting this plan, this victory plan, across various countries, presenting it to the United States, to European countries, and really trying to convince the world to adopt or kind of approve of this plan. And so now we have kind of a first-hand, clear idea of what this plan, what it is built on. And there's 5 main points here that I want to present to you guys, talk about. This is just a general summary. There's a lot more detail behind each of these points, but I think it still summarizes pretty well the overall path of and the planning for Ukraine for next year as well. So as we're seeing, there's 5 points. So let's cover the first one. And point number 1 mentions that Ukraine needs to have an immediate invitation to NATO, securing Ukraine's place within the international security architecture. And this is a must. Again, I'm not saying that Ukraine needs to be part of NATO, absolutely, but Ukraine needs to have some sort of a guaranteed military alliance. And if it's not NATO, then it needs to be a guaranteed military alliance with the United States. Something similar like with what's happening with Japan, South Korea, and Jordan, where the United States has military bases and it has presence in these countries, or even in Germany. Ukraine needs to have that security guarantee that there is a strong military power present in Ukraine that can protect it in case something happens. That's an absolute must. But of course, the best case scenario would be NATO membership. And I think we will probably start seeing some positive signs after the US elections. I'm hoping that Kamala Harris is going to win because she's going to be more predictable. We know that if she wins, more or less, it's going to be the same path. But I'm also anticipating that after the US elections end, that Biden will make some very positive announcements for Ukraine, including perhaps the beginning of the discussion of allowing Ukraine to NATO and being more permissive around that topic. So I fully agree that Ukraine absolutely needs to be part of NATO if we want to establish a guaranteed peace in the region. Second, the plan envisions military strengthening of Ukraine to destroy the offensive potential of the Russian Federation on occupied territories and to conduct operations on the aggressor state's territory. Makes sense. Weapons is what Ukraine needs. And this is already happening. We're already seeing a lot of collaboration between Ukraine and defense industries in Europe, like Rheinmetall, Bayraktar in Turkey. They're establishing plants, collaborating with Ukrainian industries to repair tanks, build drones, other very important components. So this is already happening, and we're already seeing that the help continues to flow. I believe yesterday the United States approved another military package of around $425 million. Today, Norway, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned that they're going to provide 6 more additional F-16s. Then we have France a few days ago, which approved the transfer of Mirage jet fighters in early 2025. So this needs to continue, and Ukraine cannot have moments where there's a drought of help for 6 to 7 months, like with what we saw in last year in the winter of 2023-2024. Additionally, the number 3 is proposing the deployment of a comprehensive non-nuclear strategic deterrence package in Ukraine, sufficient to protect against any military threat from Russia. I think that kind of falls in line with point 1, building bases within Ukraine, NATO bases, to be able to deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again. And this would be a huge win again, because let's face it, Russia's main reason why they started their SMO is because they wanted to deter NATO being in Ukraine. They didn't want NATO in Ukraine. And having Ukraine being part of NATO, this would be a huge blow to the Russian population, which then would be asking questions as to why did we sacrifice hundreds of thousands of men and women to achieve absolutely nothing when we still have NATO bases right beside our borders. And let's face it, Finland now is a member of NATO. So that's already a huge failure for Putin. So I think point 3 really falls in line with point 1. Number 4, it's discussing the involves an agreement with partners on the protection and management of Ukraine's critical resources, such as uranium, lithium, graphite, titanium, etc. We know that Ukraine is really a gold mine, literally no pun intended, of resources. There's, as you can see, different very critical resources necessary for the world, including lithium, which produces most of the batteries that we use on this planet, but also as a breadbasket of the world. Ukraine is sitting on one of the most fertile lands in the world as well, feeding about 400 to 500 million people all across the world. So, you know, Ukraine also is worth fighting for. It's not just some small country that isn't really innovating and producing anything useful. Ukraine is absolutely necessary for Europe. And I'm really hoping that here, Ukraine, if that works out, Ukraine is going to be guided by Europe to properly manage its resources. Because if there's one thing that Ukraine always messed up in its modern history, was in managing its own resources with all the oligarchs and corruption going on. You know, Ukraine was never able to really come out a successfully strong country because of, you know, the post-Soviet oligarch system, which was established in the 90s. And last but not least, point 5 suggests replacing US contingents in Europe with Ukrainian contingents. I think it's more of a message to the United States, kind of saying to the US that, hey, you know, we understand that your main opponent is not Russia, it's China. Let's face it. The United States sees China as their number one opponent, definitely not Russia at this stage. And Ukraine is willing on taking a more important role, bigger responsibility in Europe. Let's face it, Ukraine has been protecting and shielding Europe for the last 10 years from Russian aggression. And Ukraine is the only country that has the experience in fighting against Russia. No other country in NATO has that experience. And so this is the logical, I think, future, is that Ukraine is the one taking on that important role of protecting Europe. And thus the name Ukraine, the country that sits at the border with, you know, the orcs, literally, it's a very, very logical continuation for Ukraine, in my opinion, here. So these are the 5 points. You guys can let me know in the comment section what you think about it. But obviously, it's becoming very clear now with the last few weeks that, in my opinion, we could see the end of the current conflict by the end of 2025, early 2026. The motions are already happening, negotiations, talks. You know, it really started in the summer with the Swiss Peace Summit. And I think that now we're really beginning to see the momentum pick up. It's difficult to say what of these points is going to be realistically fulfilled, which situation Ukraine is going to be in 1 year, because a lot of it depends, again, unfortunately, the US elections are going to happen in less than 3 weeks. And Ukraine is going to be impacted. Its position at the negotiating table is really going to be impacted by who wins the elections, the Senate, also Congress. Because let's face it, it's not just the president that's going to decide of the United States that's going to decide the fate of this war, but it's also Congress, Senate. After all, the US is a democracy that is not just, you know, working or fully functional just because of one president. And also, I need to mention one quick thing here, is that there's also 3 mysterious points, hidden points that Zelensky didn't announce, so we don't know what they entail, but there's also more points. There's also more detail. But if I was to give my 5 cents on this victory plan, I fully agree with it. I think this gives Ukraine a vision of where Ukraine wants to be in the future, and provides kind of a signal to the world that Ukraine is serious. Ukraine is not just, you know, winging it. Ukraine is, you know, establishing plans, trying to create a vision of how they see the future of the country. And that's really important as well, showcasing to the world that Ukraine is serious about this. They're not just winging it. So you guys can let me know what you think about it. Also, there was a rumor that was spread around today that Zelensky, apparently during his conversation with Trump, mentioned that if Ukraine would not be part of NATO, then they would restore its nuclear weapon program. You guys can let me know in the comment section you think that if Ukraine was to do that, would that be the right move? Personally, I don't think it would, because it's a very resource intensive process. It takes so much money to you know, kickstart a nuclear weapon program, And let's face it, Ukraine will get so much pressure by the United States and its partners to not do that. There would be economic sanctions, and they would make life extremely difficult for Ukraine because they don't want to set a precedent all across the world. Oh, well, if Ukraine is doing it, then why can't Japan? Why can't South Korea? Why can't other countries, Germany, do it? Right? And that would create a massive, massive wave of countries that will think, oh, it's a good thing to do. Maybe we should also do our own nuclear weapon program. So Zelensky actually mentioned to that's not true. That's not what he said. So it appears to be just a rumor. Now, let's go to the other news. And these are also very positive because yesterday there was an event that occurred in Moscow where a high-ranking GRU officer, Russian GRU officer, was shot dead close to Moscow. And could this be another Ukrainian operation on Russian commanders? Because we know that a few months ago, something similar happened in Moscow where a bomb detonated when one of those commanders stepped in the car. So it seems like it could very well be a Ukrainian SBU mission within Moscow. And the details mention that the person that was killed is Nikita Klinkov, a deputy commander of a unit for Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU, and he was shot dead in Moscow Oblast by an unknown assailant. The assailant reportedly fired 8 shots from the window of a car, and apparently this Klinkov dude returned from the front line in Ukraine just a week ago. So the investigators also mentioned that they don't have any leads, and they're guessing that this was the work of a real specialist because he apparently fled on foot into a forest after shooting this deputy commander. And they did mention that there was somebody that might have fired shots from a car, but then apparently investigators mentioned that it was just some passer, somebody that was just passing by, actually. So they have absolutely no details of what really happened then yesterday in Moscow. And so, again, as I mentioned, this is not the first time they've been targeted. And this is really important because this is also showcasing that no Russian criminal is safe, even in Russia. It's definitely going to increase the tensions within the elites in the Kremlin and in Moscow because a lot of them live in the in the suburbs of Moscow, the outside of Moscow. And so to think that there is a Ukrainian, hitman walking around in the city of Moscow that is capable of planning these operations, that is scary for them, right? Because they were promised by Putin a safe haven, that they won't be impacted by this war. And here we are, we're seeing commanders getting shot and blown up. Although it's not happening on a weekly basis, this seems to be like it's more, on a monthly basis, but it's still happening. So that can send some very large waves within the Kremlin. And last but not least, let's talk about another kind of interesting mystery. So this week, Russian Telegram channels have started reporting that they started seeing a lot of dragon's teeth appearing out of nowhere on these evacuation roads and logistics roads that Russia is using to resupply its troops, but also evacuate wounded soldiers. And they report that there's been numerous situations in the past week where Russian soldiers were either injured or died as a result of these dragon's teeth being placed in the middle of the road at night as they're driving. They're not seeing them and they're just heading, going headfirst into them. And then, obviously, you can understand the type of impact that occurs if you go 100 kilometers per hour into a concrete block that is 1 ton. So they don't know who's doing that. There was also I think it's a trolling video, but as you can see here, the Ukrainians yesterday released a video of what appears to be a quadrocopter, a drone carrying a concrete block. But I seriously doubt it because these blocks, as I mentioned, at the very least weigh about 500 kilos, if not a ton. So it would be impossible for a small, even a bulky drone, an industrial drone, to carry this type of payload. If that would be the case, it would be extremely, extremely impressive. So if Ukraine somehow managed to innovate and be able to carry such huge payloads with its drones, this would be a massive game changer. But for now, I think that it's more Ukrainian partisans taking part of this operation. And let's not forget about them because they're the unsung heroes of the war as well. There's a lot of partisans and saboteurs working deep in the rear, and also Ukrainian hitmen working in Russia. They're doing work that, we kind of take for granted. We don't take into account very often, but it's very important as well, destabilizing the Russian regime. So I just wanted to share this story with you guys. You can let me know in the comment section. Do you think that these mysterious dragon's teeth are being placed by drones, or it's actually just partisans that are capable of planning this sort of situation for the Russians? So thank you so much for your support. Let me know as well about the victory plan. What are the things that you like about it? Do you think that most of them are achievable within the next year and a half? I'm eager to hear your opinions. And again, if you want to help out the Ukrainians in defending themselves, please donate to the Rosuri's drone fund. There's a link in the description below. And a huge thank you for your support. Slava Ukraini!